So in this video, I want to talk about immigration. I'm going to start with a question, then I'm going to discuss the topic. Periodically in the video, I may ask another question, reinforcing another thought piece. So welcome to my channel. My name is Brian. I'm a writer, traveler, and human on the planet just like you. So I'm going to look at this from two positions. One, I would like to say that this video is not to denigrate anybody based on your country of origin, your religious beliefs, the language you speak, none of that. This is not a video to put people down based on wanting a better life. However, I do want to discuss why is it that countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia for that matter, right? Countries where people immigrate frequently to the United States and or Europe. Why do countries allow citizens who left their countries to send remittances or to come back to their home country, which displaces the locals? And do you think that's fair? So when a person, let's say, leaves Mexico and they immigrate to the United States, they pick up skills such as English speaking for jobs they may make 5-10 times more than what they would make in Mexico or Colombia or Jamaica. You know, you could just, the list goes on, you know. And so they work in the United States, they make money. They might not even make what we would consider a lot of money, but they could save $5, $10, $15, $20,000, go back home and buy a property, buy homes that the locals who's been working and making a normal salary cannot afford. So it displaces the locals. And we see this going on around the world right now. This is happening in places like Mexico City, Medellin, Colombia, Jamaica. I mean, so many different places in the world where it's not uncommon to see people immigrate to the United States or to Europe. And then once they get enough money, they go back home and they end up practicing discrimination essentially against the local people. And I want to know, do you think that that's fair? Because the locals who could not get a visa, the locals who could not leave, the locals who were forced to stay are actually punished for not being able to stay. And the people who were able to leave are rewarded for being able to bring money into the economy. And so right now, in 2025, we seen protests going on in Mexico, making world headline news. People discussing how, you know, the gringos are, you know, displacing the locals. And they framed it as it was the Americans that are displacing the locals, but I don't think that they're really looking at the big picture and saying a lot of the people that's displacing you are fellow Latinos, is other Hispanics, other Mexicans that's displacing you. And for my people in the Caribbean or Africa, it's the same thing. People in Nigeria who travel to, or West Africans for that matter, you could be from Nigeria, Ghana, you know, Sierra Leone, wherever country you're from, you know, Cameroon, they go to Europe, they go to Africa. I mean, they go to Europe, they go to the United States, they make a bunch of money, and then next thing you know, they could go back home and live a life that the locals can't live. And I want to know, do you think that that's fair? So that's one form, is people from poorer nations traveling to richer nations for a better life. and then being able to return home and displace locals. Why is this such a huge problem? Well, it's simple. If I am a local and I can't financially compete with a fellow citizen who moves to a rich country and now they're able to afford a standard of living in the home country that I never left, right? And then now they can outbid me on property, pay more for groceries, and then if things get bad, they could possibly go back to the United States or go back to Europe. Excuse me. And so it's very interesting. And I never looked at this as an issue, honestly, until I started traveling. And after going to different countries and started realizing, like, man, the locals could never compete with, financially that is, with the person who is able to bring in their salary into their nation. It's just impossible, okay? But then this has another effect. The US dollar then displaces the local currency. So in places like the Latin America, the Caribbean, and I'm sure it's happening in Africa too, the locals are coming back with American currencies. I mean, the foreigners are coming with American currencies. And I'm talking about the foreigners that would be expats, the people who are citizens of that nation, but they immigrated to the United States or Europe and then they came back. Well, they are then able to displace a lot of the locals, and then the US dollar becomes the dominant currency in that country. And so now people don't want the Mexican peso, the Colombian peso, right? People don't want the Jamaican currency or the Cuban currency or the Nigerian naira. People want the United States dollar, right? And so the United States dollar undermines and destabilizes the financial situation even more, because the locals they now have to trade in the United States dollars. So I've seen this firsthand. I'm not telling you something that I read on the internet. I'm telling you things that I've seen firsthand, and I don't think it's fair for the locals, because if you're a local person, you stayed in your home country. You should be rewarded for that. I think that the local people should be given first dibs on properties. They should be able to pay whatever they pay in their pesos or their local currency and get more bang for their buck. But the way capitalism is, it has effects where more money. But like as the saying goes, more money, more problems. And I want to know, do you think that it's fair that the governments of these nations allow people to do this to the local people? No one is speaking about it really from the local perspective. Everyone is looking at it from the perspective of the people who get this money, and that is always speaking from the position of the wealthier person. It's never spoken from the position of the poor person, and from a rich country to a poor country. So let's talk about that. As inflation, the cost of living rises in the United States, rises in Europe, a lot of people game plan is either to live overseas in a poorer nation and buy a better standard of living, be able to afford a better standard of living, or retire in a poorer country. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. This is another form of the displacement of the locals, okay? Because people are going to leave their rich country. So, like me, I'm born in the United States, okay? I was born in the United States. I was educated in the United States. I am an American. My parents are both Americans. My grandparents. We have a long line of history being in the United States, right? Okay. But things are expensive, you know. It's expensive to buy a property. It's expensive to have a car here. It's expensive to live. But if the average American took their salary of, let's just say, $50,000, and let's say they could have that salary in a lump sum, and they moved to Mexico, Honduras, Panama, a country in Latin America or the Caribbean. They moved to an African nation. They moved to Asia, even parts of Europe, like Eastern Europe. Their money would go so much further. They probably, off 1 year of an American salary, could probably live 2 to 3 years overseas, or at minimum, they could start a new life. They could buy a property. They could travel. They could experience comforts and joys because the currency is worth more that the locals could never experience. So it's displacing the locals, but then it's also bringing money to the locals. Also, now, so it's two factors. When people, middle class people, can't afford the life in a rich country, they start thinking about immigration, but they think about it in reverse. They're like, hey, if I go to this Latin American country, this Caribbean country, this African nation, if I go to a country in Asia, my money is worth more. I could live a better life. That's the same thing that the locals who are able to migrate to the United States or Europe and have a living, have a standard of living. That's what they're thinking too. So I would say Americans learned this from studying foreigners coming to the United States. Okay, but it introduces a lot of problems, as I stated, because the money situation displaces a lot of the locals. A lot of times in these countries, what ends up happening is if you don't have a family member in the United States, you don't have a family member in Europe, being able to send you money back, you're not going to be able to compete with all of the other people who have family members in the richer nations. And what becomes the goal, unfortunately, is not to stay and rebuild your country, rebuild your nation. But then the goal becomes, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to go to a rich country and I'm never going to go back, you know? Some people might say that they're going to go back, but a lot of people don't go back. And then the people who do go back, they end up displacing the people who never left. So I want to know, what do you think is the solution to this problem? Because even as an Americano, I'm part of this problem too, because, you know, I could see me living in another country because the cost of living is lower and I saved a bunch of money. You know, a lot of Americans can't retire in the United States. Currently, it's saying that it's going to take the average American close to $2 or $3 million in order to retire in the United States. So some people may have to work until they're 70s years old. They just work, never get to enjoy life. The work culture in the United States is preposterous. It's just people live to work in the United States. You know, from the time that you're 18 to 25, you're trying to get an education so you can work. When you do get the education, a lot of Americans have to pay thousands of dollars in student loans. So that might take them 4 to 10 years to pay off. Then they realize that they have a job, but then they have a lot of student loans. Then a lot of Americans get trapped or caught in paying for a mortgage, a house that they can't afford. You know, everything in the United States is designed to trap you, in my opinion. And the only way out of the trap is by thinking of ways to get other people to pay for it. That's essentially the U.S. model. It's like, You want to buy a house, you buy a property, you have someone else, you rent it out to someone else, they're paying off your debt. You know, you want to start a business, you start a business, you get other people to work for you, they're making you money to keep your business afloat. You know, like the whole model of the United States is kind of wild, but it also translates overseas too. I mean, this is the way of the world, right? The strong feed off of the weak, you know, but then you need strong people because somebody has to run it, you know. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, so many Americans will travel to Latin America, and I'm seeing more and more and more it being popularized on social media of Americans basically displacing the locals. You know, if you can't beat them, join them. Like a lot of Americans have tried to retire in the United States, and it just hasn't been working. So I think of a lot of Americans are looking at the situation and saying, moving to Mexico City, moving to Merida, moving to Osaka, or moving to Cartagena, Bogota, Medellin, moving to Panama City, moving to Belize, you know, or moving to Ghana, Nigeria even, you know, Nairobi. You know, a lot of people are looking at different places like, man, you know what? It can't be worse than just being in America being poor or working to be poor. You know what I'm saying? So they move to these countries, they buy a better standard of living. And I think with the poorer nations, and closing is able to give the wealthy person that's traveling there that America can no longer give us is lower rents, lower health care, organic food supply, culture, where, you know, in a lot of these countries, it's not uncommon. You go outside in the morning, you see people walking, shopping centers, people and you know, being able to communicate with each other. The United States is so hostile right now. People can't even or don't even want to talk to someone outside because the other person might perceive it as a threat. And everything in the United States is go, go, go. But my original point is, it seems as though people in poor nations want to go to rich nations. People in rich nations are now considering traveling to poorer nations for a better life. And it's ironic how people can understand people going from a poorer nation to a richer nation for a better life. But it's ironic how people are demonized or criticized for going from a rich country to a poorer nation for a better life. It's the same thing, it's just done in a slightly different way. But I can stress that I do think that the loser in all of this are the people who are not able to leave, the people that's forced to stay. So I think that the government should create some type of benefit to protect the rights of the people who can't migrate to the United States or Europe.
Whoever you are, to be using Rolls Royce. You know, if you have money for Rolls Royce, you should go and put up an industry in your locality or anywhere part of Nigeria, wherever that you feel there is a need. You know, and that's why really sometimes it pains me when I go to the local airport, whether it's here or Lagos. You see that to even find a parking of your plane is impossible. Everybody has a private jet. Those private jets will be in industries.